Written quizzes can be hard enough as it is without going into them without a plan. In this video I'm going to give you tips and strategies that will help you cut down on mistakes and maximise your points. In particular, I will focus on the 7 deadly sins of written quizzing. They are poor personal preparation, running out of time, not reading the questions properly, missing clues, not putting answers down for gettable points, name errors and double thinking. So we start with avoiding poor personal preparation. This is about getting you ready for the quiz. It's not about learning stuff, it's about you being ready to perform. So prepare yourself well, sleep well the night before, hydrate, fuel yourself up with a good breakfast, be mentally ready to quiz, be calm, be in the zone. When you're in the quiz room, prepare your environment. Make sure you've got a drink and perhaps some snacks with you, but don't overdose on sugar. That's going to harm you down the line. Have a watch. That's important for keeping track of time. Make sure you've got all the writing implements you need, your preferred type of pens. Make sure you've got some note paper. Make sure that you find a seat in a comfortable location. Go to the toilet beforehand. Now this may seem like an odd one, but you don't want to waste 3 to 5 minutes in the middle of your quiz going to the toilet. That is time that you could be spent getting questions right. Not only that, by the time you get back, you've got to get yourself back into the zone. So make sure that you are physically and mentally prepared for when the quiz starts. All of that will put you in a good position to tackle the questions. The second deadly sin is running out of time. Have a watch available or a clock in your line of sight. Be aware of what's coming up in the quiz, how many questions there are, how much ground you've got to cover in the time available, and start to form a plan. Manage the situation. You can control this to a degree. Don't leave yourself with 15 minutes to go and half of the questions yet to be read. My strategy is this. I go through the paper pretty quickly first off, making sure that I pick up all of the level 1 and 2 questions, get them tucked away safely. If ideas come up for some of the others, then I'll note them down. It's particularly the case with 50/50s, but basically I'm focusing on my first trip through the question paper is just ticking off all those easy questions. I'm not going to waste time on the hard ones. By the time I've completed that first pass, I've got a pretty good idea of the overall difficulty of the quiz, how hard I'm going to have to work to get a decent score, and I can make a call as to whether I have the time to go over every single question again, or whether I prioritise particular genres or the level 3 or 4 questions. But I've got that information because I've got a sense of the paper straight off the bat. On the second pass through, I write my answers in a different colour, and I concentrate on the questions where I'm confident that I can either get to the answer or make a decent guess. If there's a question nagging at me, then I make a note on a separate piece of paper so that all of the potentially answerable questions are in one place and I don't have to waste time flicking through the paper. I can then focus on using the techniques I explained in this video to fish the answers out. I then have one final sweep through the hardest questions, putting answers in and trying to avoid leading gaps. If you only know one Italian skier, put that. If you only know one mountain in Spain, put that. You definitely get no points for leaving blanks. And if in doubt, throw in some go-to guesses. For example, for an American person, guess the surname Johnson. For a Korean, guess Park or Kim. I try to leave myself some time at the end, perhaps 5 to 10 minutes, to go through my paper one final time, double checking the answers from my first pass. Sometimes speed can lead to silly errors, and being able to identify those first pass answers by the colour of the ink that I used makes it really easy for me to double check that I've got those questions correct and I'm not throwing away points. What I've just described is my ideal way of approaching these things. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes a quiz is so hard that after the first sweep through, I'm straight into the hardest questions. And that's fine. You'll know that's going to be the case after your first sweep, and you can adjust your timing and your strategy accordingly. But for me, that first dash through the paper is critical to understanding what lays ahead and being able to adjust my plan accordingly. But different people have different approaches, and I know some very good quizzers who only really make one pass through their paper and they concentrate on each question in turn, absolutely whittling them down until they get them and then move on to the next one. But they also manage their time. They don't leave themselves short at the end, and they also have strategies for fishing answers out. Now, I use colour pens to make it easy to scan my paper to find out what I answered when and to potentially identify those I'm not sure on. Other people use highlighters or symbols. Find what works for you. Now, not reading the questions properly is one of the most heinous sins in quiz. The first and most essential thing to do is RTFQ, read the flipping question. The temptation is to decide halfway through the question that you know where it's going and to not properly process the question. Just because a singer hasn't been mentioned by name doesn't mean that they're asking for the name of the singer. It might be being excluded by the question writer to make the question harder. Some quizzes highlight the key thing you're being asked about, e.g. which astronaut, which century, but not all do that, so be sure you're answering the question that is actually being asked. Even then, it's easy to be tripped up by visually similar words, like reading which county as which country. So, read the flipping question. This is where the value of the final check comes in my strategy. It helps to pick up those errors, and I do make those errors from time to time. Missing clues. Now, sometimes a question can be really impenetrable, especially if it's long and densely packed with information. But is it as hard as it seems? What are they actually asking for? Strip the question back to what they are asking you for, e.g., they're asking for a 19th century Russian novelist. Okay, there's loads of detail to kind of identify which specific one, but if you can even narrow it down to Russian novelists, you can create a list. Then see if some of the details can help you remove some people from the list, and if you maybe then have a nagging intuition about an answer, even if you're not certain, you can go for it until you have a reason not to. Look for a way into a question. Sometimes questions are built in fiendish ways. Is there a slightly odd phrasing or word choice? Why might the setters be doing that? Could it be a clue? Sometimes extra details are included in order to exclude potentially plausible answers. If you've got a list of options, can details such as dates or locations help you to narrow the options down? A simple phrasing can sometimes tell you a lot. Which North American city probably means you're looking for somewhere in Canada or Mexico. So look for clues, but not for too long. Don't let it cost you other points by wasting time. You can always come back later. The sin of not putting answers down for gettable points. Even if you have very little confidence, make sure you put down a guess. Every now and then the answer is going to be Smith, and you will kick yourself if you left it blank. This is the value of the final sweep through the paper before checking your level 1. Sometimes your inspired guesses are actually your brain dredging something up from God knows where. But don't forget your Johnsons, your Parks, your Kims, your only mountain in Spain, your only Italian skier. Get those answers in. If you can make a guess, that makes it a gettable point. The sin of name errors. If it's a surname quiz, be disciplined about putting surnames unless you have a reason not to. Surnames only helps you to avoid silly errors, but if you're not 100% sure about a surname, then sometimes putting a fuller answer is better, rather than assuming that Bulwer-Lytton's first name was Bulwer, it wasn't, or that Bauhaus luminary Mies van der Rohe had the first name Mies, he didn't, it's all his surname. Then put the most full answer you can. And double thinking. Now, very often in a late sweep through a paper, alternative answers pop into your mind, sometimes even on the level 1s and level 2s. They can be flashes of inspiration that earn you points, but they can also be tempting sirens luring you onto the rocks of lost points. Don't make a change just because there is a new plausible answer on the scene. Ask yourself, is there a reason that this new answer is an unquestionably better answer than the one I had down before? If it's not, don't change it. If it's a good answer, check your basis for your original answer. Was there a rationale, or did it feel right at the time? If this new one is a stronger answer, then change it. But whatever you do, don't just change your answer because originally you could only think of one answer and now there is a second. So those are your strategies and tactics for dealing with the 7 deadly sins of written quizzing. And just to recap, those 7 deadly sins are: poor personal preparation, running out of time, not reading the questions properly, missing the clues that are in there, not putting answers down for gettable points, making name errors, and double thinking yourself. Well, best of luck, and don't forget that if you want to see a video about how to fish out answers that are on the tip of your tongue, then this video that's popped up on your screen now is really good for that.